As we know from our recent longevity clinic survey, just over 30% of clinics offer whole body scanning as part of their imaging diagnostics, which kind of demonstrates an emerging stratification in terms of the market between diagnostics and interventions. Now, market leader Prenuvo has completed over 100,000 whole body MRIs, a big milestone for them and the field of imaging in preventative medicine. Now, who better to speak to about this as a growing market than Prenuvo's founder and CEO, Andrew Lacy. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm great, thanks. It's great to be here, Phil.
Well, congratulations on the milestone. Now, obviously, what you guys represent is really that very proactive preventative health, early detection being what we're all about in longevity. How do you envisage this approach that you guys have pioneered really scaling up into much more wider embracing of this as a diagnostic approach in the field?
Wow, it's a long question to unpack. I mean, I think probably one of the biggest challenges right now is just general awareness that these technologies exist. And we often say when people ask, who's your competition? Our competition is ignorance that you can go and get one of these scans. And I would say that's true with respect to consumers. It's also true with respect to physicians who tend to, carry forward a notion of what MRI was like when they went to medical school, maybe 20 or 30 years earlier. The technology has come a long way. Our ability to screen at diagnostic quality the entire body, in under an hour is something that's new and unprecedented. And it really sort of enabled this technology that previously really was only available in tertiary hospitals in a 3-hour sort of imaging session for people that tended to have cancer predisposition syndrome. So we've taken that technology, sped it up, and now make it available for everyone.
Yeah, great. And I read that you have this diffusion weighted imaging, which is obviously quite an interesting take, and you don't use contrast agents. So could you maybe just explain how your technology has helped you accelerate and maybe scale up as you're doing?
Well, this is mainly helps with lesion discrimination, although it has other uses as well. It was actually a technology that was invented for stroke imaging. And we use this to look inside the body for areas of high cytoplasmic ratio or restricted diffusion of water. And what this really means in layman's terms is sort of hard spots inside the body. And you recall, women are often told to feel their breasts for lumps. Well, not every lump is a cancer, but every cancer is a lump. So this diffusion imaging enables us to look inside the body for these hard spots. And then we use all of the traditional anatomical imaging to then help us understand exactly what we're looking at.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. And of course, you detect over 500 conditions, right? Which obviously can include those early stage cancers. I guess, as the rumors are in the industry, you do get some false positives out of all of this as well. So how do you ensure that your patients aren't really, or your clients aren't overwhelmed by these incidental findings?
Well, I think the fear is sort of definitely out of proportion from the reality. Again, the technology has come a long way. And what we do at Prenuvo is we risk stratify everything that we see. So we follow a similar approach to what we do with mammography or thyroid ultrasound or prostate MRI, where if we see something, we basically classify it on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is very concerning and 1 is completely benign. And if someone has a 3 or 4, oftentimes they'll need to go and get additional imaging. Now, just because you have a 4 doesn't mean it's 100% likely to be cancer, but the risk is pretty high. And so oftentimes we'll send people imaging and it'll come back as some benign sort of lesion. And that's, I think, a great outcome for that patient. If it comes back that it's cancer, it's also a great outcome because 90+% of the cancers we find are stage 1. And that's the real power of this technology.
And how do you hand off to the physicians? I mean, obviously, I've seen one of your sample reports on your website, which was really very interesting. And I guess, obviously, you're armed with that information as an individual. Or how do you connect the report to the client to the next stage of the physician journey?
Well, for sure, it depends a little bit on what we find. So if someone has what we call serious findings, now that could be things that are life-threatening, or it could be things that are misunderstood frequently by consumers. We often will reach out directly to the physician and their patient to really help contextualize those results for them. If someone has a rather routine set of results, routine age-related degeneration of spine or some small ischemic changes in the brain or things that we might expect to see in someone as they age. Obviously, we don't want to see them, but we do see them. We release those results directly to the patient, and then they follow up with a nurse practitioner that works for Prenuvo to help really, again, provide a lot of context, answer questions, make sure that the patients really feel empowered.
Okay, and of course, with Prenuvo's work, I mean, you guys obviously have got Kim Kardashian and people like that have been through your process. How do you kind of equate this challenge that the whole industry has got? That obviously people that can afford these diagnostics can access them, people that can't obviously don't at the moment. But you're kind of setting a precedent for how preventative healthcare could be scaled up at a national level. I mean, do you find that you're getting in dialogues with whether it's insurance companies or even policymakers to sort of share your learnings?
Well, for sure. I mean, there's a few aspects to it. The first is obviously cost comes down as scale goes up. And even though we've scanned 100,000 people, in the US, that's 100,000 out of 300 million. So it's still sort of relatively small scale. And as we learn how to do these scans faster, we can figure out how to operate these clinics more efficiently. There's the possibility of really bringing down the cost quite a bit. AI has a role to play there. So obviously, one of the most expensive costs is radiology. And the more of that radiology workload can be offloaded to AI, or AI can help make radiologists more productive, there's a real possibility to bring down costs there as well. We are, the third lever really is, we're in the process of collecting evidence for discussions with insurance companies and enterprise. And everyone that comes in is in some ways part of that evidence gathering process. So those folks that can afford to get these scans today are in fact paving the way for hopefully having these scans be part of the insurance system in the future.
Yeah. And I did see that you had some insurance information on your site. Do you see that really the insurance industry is needing to step up a little bit? And obviously they're protecting their clients as well as obviously protecting their insurance risk, right? So I guess this is an opportunity for really starting to move not only the healthcare sector on, but the insurance sector too.
Well, I'm not American, so I don't pretend to understand deeply how the insurance world works in the US. I think it's confusing to most people.
Right.
But, I think one of the both opportunities and challenges of technology like Prenuvo is that this is a really fundamental different way of looking at sort of health and healthcare. It's a much more proactive, much less reactive approach. And in the short term, that might add additional costs because you're doing a screening that you may not have never done in the traditional healthcare system. But I believe in the long run, this can really help transform our healthcare system to one that's a lot leaner, maybe half the size, and obviously with much better outcomes for patients. So it's a complex intervention that makes it particularly challenging for governments and health insurance companies to really understand how to evaluate it.
Yeah, and of course, I guess your WhatsApp's been going pretty busy with the announcements being made by the likes of Neko Health, and they've just raised 260 million. So I guess what differentiates your service, because you guys have been at it quite a long time, right?
Well, I'd say what we have in common is, I think, frustration with how the traditional annual physical, comprises of, which is basically nothing. I think the last annual physical I went to was probably 10 years ago, and they looked at my. I was carrying a little bit of weight around the belly, and I told them I was a bit stressed, and their advice was be less stressed and do some exercise and get rid of that belly. I mean, these were all things that I could have told myself looking in the mirror, right? So I think most people are disillusioned by, the preventative offerings that the health system currently provides, and they're looking for answers. And I think both, Prenuvo and Neko, Prenuvo, I think, is at the very, very comprehensive end of that spectrum. Our goal really is to be 100 times better than what an annual physical might be. I think Neko is, obviously, offering something that is a lower priced option, but I think also is a big improvement over what you might get if you just went to your regular GP for a checkup.
Yeah, of course. And as you know, our beat is very much the longevity community, whether they're physicians or practitioners themselves, whether they're longevity hackers. How would you say that regular scanning helps people really highlight their long-term health optimization? Obviously, you get the spots where you see there's perhaps a disease concern, but overall health optimization, do you see that that's something that you can work from perhaps a metabolic level with the scans that you have?
I don't know metabolically, but I just think the biggest opportunity for me, what makes me most excited is, so ironically, a lot of people come in for a scan because they want to check they don't have something life-threatening. Yeah. So they're really focused on, what we call lifespan, making sure I don't die earlier than I otherwise would. But these scans are so incredible in that they're able to pick up very, very early stages of degenerative disease. And these, it's so early that patients are typically asymptomatic. And oftentimes just lifestyle interventions can make a massive difference as to whether that condition ever arrives at a chronic stage. And as you know, a lot of the vast majority of our healthcare expenditure is on treating chronic disease. The biggest gap in health span, how healthy the life is that we're living, relates to whether or not we have chronic disease. So this is a real opportunity to get ahead of those things, 20 years before. I'll give you a simple example. I have degenerative disc disease in my cervical spine. It was picked up on my first scan 5 years ago, and I have a walking treadmill desk now. And I walk, a half marathon oftentimes during a day, and that disc disease has not progressed in 5 years because I'm very aware of this now, and I don't want it to ever arrive at a point where it's going to be symptomatic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, those are the success stories that, underpin all of the work that you guys are doing. And I guess, just coming back to some of those, people that are perhaps over analytical and the sort of perception of scan anxiety, do you find that there needs to be a sort of management of expectations with people that you're working with, and kind of what they should be looking for and what they shouldn't be too concerned about?
Well, for sure. I mean, I sort of take a more holistic view, and I ask the question, well, why are we so afraid about our health? Like, what is it? Because we're not born this way. A young child will tell you everything that's going on with them, and then something happens between being a child and becoming an adult where we feel pain, we ignore it. We don't want to look and see what it might be. And I would put it to you that the reactive healthcare system has essentially made us fear health. Because if everything is diagnosed late, why on earth would you want to be diagnosed with anything? Because every diagnosis is going to be life-changing. And, so we're on a mission to really redefine what disease even means. And so for people that have that anxiety, I think the first step is to say, you know what, this is not you. This is a natural response to a health system that's very reactive. And I think once people realize that, they feel somewhat more empowered to then, okay, I get that, I want to explore a different way of thinking about, managing my health. And the reason I did this, I built the company, is because after my first scan, I felt such tremendous peace of mind. Right. I wish I could find a way to describe it, because, it's really priceless. And as it relates to health, it's something I'd never had before in, 40 years of my life.
Yeah. And Andrew, we just completed a full survey of longevity clinics. There are, in our data sets, there are over 320 of them now, whether they're individual clinics or groups. And as I mentioned in my intro, only 30% of those are really using full body MRI or CT as part of their diagnostic procedure. I mean, would you say that that's a significant missing link in their protocol, or do you feel that it's kind of an add-on that's okay to do without for some protocols?
Well, I think doing anything is better than doing nothing. So right. I think there are a lot of tests that can be very helpful. We wouldn't have focused on imaging as a company if we didn't think this was probably the most promising of all the modalities. This is not to say that this is the only thing that I would do. I also get frequent blood tests, and I go and get a colonoscopy when I need to. And so there are other tests out there, but we do think that this is probably the highest yield use of an hour of your time. Of all the tests you might possibly choose from. So for those clinics, I would suggest, we actually partner with a lot of clinics and bring the technology to new markets. So we're always interested to explore doing this, bringing these exams to people in different countries around the world.
Yeah, great. And of course, you guys have been knocking it out of the park with your 100,000 scans. I think it's a lot of potential issues that have been resolved, whether people are asymptomatic or whatever it may be. So what's next for you guys? I mean, obviously, you must be thinking about scaling.
Yeah, I mean, this is the main focus of the company, is how do we keep scaling and bringing these services to more and more people. So this year we'll be expanding internationally. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. We'll be opening a location there in a few months. So I'm really excited to be able to have a clinic close to where my parents are so they can get screened. We'll be opening in Europe later this year, and we're looking at other markets internationally. So I think this 2025 is a year of bringing this technology to people around the world.
Great. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and good luck to you and your colleagues as you start hitting the expansion plans.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.